incident in the pits with Roger that I stood up to him but didn't get irate or flailing my arms about and scream and yell. I won that battle and then some.
You developed a lot of things. I saw you doing it, so I was always impressed. A lot of people don't know I shoot too, over the years, but a lot of things like the photographers meetings, the vests, those were all things that Ron developed that had never been anywhere before. Tell us about that.
In 1992, I was doing all the kart races as well as the speedway and quite a few USAC races. Anytime there was a race, I was trying to be there. I did some NASCAR, I did a few Formula One events, but I'd always go on the weekends. If I had to fly someplace, I'd take a red eye. I'd be back the next morning at 9 o'clock or 8 o'clock in the morning to be at my job at the Speedway. And I got to do that in places like I never thought I'd get to see. But after I got a call from Detroit in the Grand Prix one time, Formula One, would I come and do something about the photographers because they were just running amok? I said, well, I don't know that the Formula One people will listen to it, but I'll try. So I went to Detroit in '82, and they had problems in their first race in '81, and hired a guy to do it, and he did it, but he didn't do it right. So I went there, and I did something called photo seminars, basically for the bypass photography people that spent $300 and bought a pass that they could go in certain areas and take pictures just like the pros. So I had to teach them safety. So I more or less invented the safety seminars that are still doing to this day. Me and a couple other guys that were involved in an organization I was in called ARPA, a guy named Art Flores, who's passed, and Steve Snoddy, who was on my staff and also was gone. We did it around the country. I did it at the 12 races or the 14 races I controlled around the country. Didn't have to do it so much at the Speedway because when the new photographers would come in and weren't familiar with us, I would pull them aside, take them to my trackside office, show them the map. One-on-one, I'd tell them what they could do and what they couldn't do, and try to keep them as safely as possible. And I think in my 38 years as chief photographer at the Speedway, I only had one person on my staff get injured at the Speedway. They were backed in by a TV camera in the pits. And I had one person on the road that got killed or got injured. He went to turn 2 at a time when I never thought anybody would even want to shoot over there because it was backlit. But he saw some Japanese photographers that liked that kind of lighting. Went over there during the final practice, and Emerson Fittipaldi hit the wall. No, it was Eliseo Salazar. Hit the wall. A wheel went over the wall, through the fence, because the fence was not attached right. It was attached to the back of the post and not the front of the post. Underneath, the wheel went underneath. He was ducking, but the wheel caught him right here. And he went to the hospital. They called him, they said it was a 5.
Code 5?
Code 5. He was gone. And they brought him back to life in the air ambulance and took him in the hospital. He was out that night and back at the racetrack the next day.
Whoa.
Stitches all the way across his head. His head looked like a football.
And Ron?
Yes.
He was in respiratory arrest when we got to him.
Yeah.
And so we worked him, and then it's amazing what the hospital did for him.
Just unbelievable. When I got there, his room was empty. And well, we had to wait because they still didn't have a tunnel. We had to wait because I tried to go on the helicopter. They wouldn't let me go on the helicopter. So I had to wait till practice was over and the track was cold to run to the hospital to find out, because they told me that he wasn't going to make it. And I wanted to be there to make sure that I was the first one that called his wife. And when I got there, his room was empty. And I thought, oh no, what's going on? So I went to the nurse's station. Oh, he's doing something, and the surgeons have got him in, and he'll be out. But we think he might make it. So I breathed a sigh of relief, and then stayed until he got to his room. He was talking, he was joking about it. He didn't remember anything about getting hit by the wheel, but he felt the aftermath. And he wanted to shoot the next day, and I told him no. I got him a place in a suite so he could watch the race. He still works at the Speedway, on the Speedway staff, Walt Kuhn. But it was a scary situation. But anyway, on the seminars, I did that for several years until, and actually did it at the IRL events when I did it. And then I was in control of all the events, because I went to every IRL race. I also did all the testing for the first 6 or 7 years. When we built the Disneyland track, I lived in Florida during the winter for 3 months, came home for a week, went to Phoenix for another 2 weeks while we got ready. And what I did at both of those places, and we had cars at Disney World, we had cars on the racetrack before we had fencing. So I was there taking pictures. After the track closed, again, there was no way to get out until lunch break and at the end of the day. I'd run to a 1-hour photo shop and get all the pictures I took. I'd go from there to take the 1-hour photos that I got on the 8x10s, and I'd send that and the negatives back to the Speedway via Federal Express. They get it the next morning. I go to Orlando and send this stuff via FedEx. They would put packages together. I kept a few pictures for the photographers or for the news people that came to the racetrack. And that's how we got the word out of what was going on at Disney World and in the IRL. I worked probably 18 to 20-hour days during that 3 months time I was in Florida. I saw basically nothing but the racetrack, the motel, and occasionally McDonald's where I got to eat once a day. But it was enjoyable. I also was involved in setting up the racetracks when they built Las Vegas, setting it up for photography to be places where it was safe for them, for photographers to go shoot, and where they put fencing up. I asked them, and they obliged by cutting holes in the fence that they put up. Almost every place that I did racetracks, I'd have to go around the racetrack the day that I got there, cutting holes in the fence so that the photographers had a safe place to shoot.
One of the things that a lot of people in this room wouldn't know about, back when we used film, and that was exclusive, I mean, describe what it took to put on the 500 was at the time Ron was chief photographer, was the most photographed race or photographed event in the world by far. Tell us what it was like with thousands of rolls of different temperatures and kinds of film for your staff for different purposes, and what it was like trying to get that accomplished and edited that day.
Each morning when the staff would come into our photo shop at Trackside, first of all, the Trackside office was located before they built the new Formula One area, the garages and everything. It was behind south of the break in the pits, behind the tower terrace seating. And we had one room in there. There was actually 3 rooms. I had a closet office. I had an office where all of my photographers met, and I gave them their assignments, passed out the film, and it's where they turned their film in at night. Their assignments, I had photographers all around the racetrack, inside and out, high and low, and in the pit area. At the end of the day, they'd bring all their film in, and gun went off at 6 o'clock. By 7 o'clock, we had that film ready to go to the processing lab downtown. At 6 o'clock in the morning, the film would come back to me, and I'd be in there at 5 o'clock every morning, getting ready to go through the images and put the numbers on the pages, so that the next day we had all the previous day's images out for the public and the teams to look at to see if they needed to find it. Like, I had a guy on the outside of the track, and he had such an knack at shooting the cars from a head-on position, the cars going 200 miles an hour plus. The teams would come in every morning to look at those books to find out what their car was doing in the turns. And that went on for years. And team members would come in and buy pictures of themselves. But we had to have that stuff done. So when I'd get out of there at 9:30 or 10 o'clock at night, after I got all of my office work done, I came in the next morning to get the pages ready, and every once in a while one of my staffers would trickle in and kind of help. And it was more or less a one-person job because I didn't want anybody messing the books up. I had certain ways I wanted to put the books together, by days, by photographers, and we also did slides for the magazines. And we had to separate those slides by drivers, by scenes, like multi-car scenes or pit action or things like that. I separated all the accidents out. If there was ever a driver hurt, I didn't want that going in the book until I talked to the team and or the driver. The driver was killed, and I started this when I first came there. If we lost a driver, that the photographs that we had of that would never see the light of day. And I don't know what they'd done with them. I had them buried where nobody could get to them in a locked file cabinet. But when a driver was hurt, before I'd let any of those pictures get out that we had of the accident, I'd go to that driver and say, we have this. First of all, do you want to see it? Well, of course he wanted to see it. And they'd already seen it in the newspapers. I couldn't control that, but I could control what we took. And we did this up until I retired. Made sure that those pictures didn't get out to the media because I didn't want the family to have to relive that stuff. Yes.
If somebody Googled your name, would the phrase "best job ever" come up?
Probably.
Because you had a good one. Man, that's great. What was your favorite era of taking pictures? I mean, what group of drivers, if you will, or cars, or?
I don't really. My favorite era is the Roadsters.
But you started when though in the 60s?
But I started in the 70s.
70s, okay.
I started going, my first race was in 1956. My first time at the Speedway was, I hate to admit this, but 1947 when I was 2 years old. My dad and mom took me out there. We sat on the main straightaway. I don't remember a thing about it. My dad took a few pictures. He wasn't a photographer, but he took some pictures with his box camera. I still have those pictures in my collection. I started going to, well, we went to either practice or qualifications for the next several years until 1956 when I went to my first race. I missed 2 races while I was in the service. I missed the 20 race, of course, like everybody did. I did pick up my 20 credential the day before they cut credentials off. And I still have that in my collection. But I've only missed 2 races. I was in the service and listened to both races on Armed Forces Radio. One, in 66, it was the full race. 67, it was 10 minutes out of each half hour. And it almost killed me. But I've been every year since. And
So you
all
like
that.
them all, in other words.
I got along with almost all the drive. Well, I think I can say I got along with all drivers. I had a problem one time with Mario. He wasn't happy with his qualifying. He came in, posed for the crew shot. We did a crew shot, car and crew and driver, and we put the crew behind the wall, did a driver-only shot, and then had my headshot person go in and do headshots of the driver, and then they went and did the TV interview, the PA interviews. And he was unhappy that he didn't qualify where he had been practicing as fast as he'd been practicing. And he was already back to 5th when he came in. He stood still for one shot of the crew, got out of the car and started to walk away. I said, Mario, we're not done. He says, I am. You got plenty of pictures of me. His handler, Don Henderson, came to me. I'm on a platform with 7 cameras and, waiting for him to come back. And Don came over and he says, I'll get Mario back, but it's going to have to be later in the day. He's upset because shot. I says, you tell Mario that if he doesn't come back pretty soon, I'm going to use his last year's pictures instead of, I think he was running mobile oil at the time, and he was in Valvoline before that. I said, I'm going to use last year's pictures. And pretty soon, during a break in the action, they brought the car back and we were able to finish the pictures. Had one other driver that, I called it stiff. We laugh about it today. And I'm going to forget his name because I'm getting old enough I forget people's names, but he was driving the Kent Oil Special and he crashed during the day.
Tom Bagley.
Tom Bagley, thank you. Tom crashed during the day. He ended up getting in a backup car of Spike Gelhausen's. Qualified the car, but it still had Spike sponsorship all over the car. I think it was Valvoline at the time. He qualified the car, came in as soon as he got out of the car, he got out right after qualifying, and the car stopped at my position. Said, Tom, stay in the car. He told the mechanics to take the car away. He wasn't posing for pictures. Came over to me and says, I'm sorry, Ron, I can't pose this. My sponsor, Kent Oil, would pull my sponsorship. I'll bring it back later or tomorrow can we do the shots on carb day? So that's a kind of a rough day to try to get shots of the car, but if that's what we have to do, we'll have to do it. He didn't know that before he got out of the car, I already got shots of that car. That if I didn't get the car back on carb day and wasn't able to shoot it, I'd use that shot. He brought the car back, or the team brought the car back on carb day, and I waited until everything was over, and then we went down to the south end. It looked a little different, but I shot it, and a few times later we had to do that because of sponsorship. But he was the first one that really stiffed me on not doing the qualifying shot.
On a typical day, how many rolls of film would that come in for you to process?
Probably around 30 to 60, depending on the day, of course. I had about 10 photographers during the week up until Thursday or Friday, and then 15 or 20 of them showed up. And then on weekends it was about 40, and race day it was close to 50. So we did, anywhere from 20 rolls of film a day to 150.
How many pictures were on that roll? 72 at the time?
36.
36?
And we always had to burn one. If the photographer didn't do it, I'd tell the photographers burn one because we could only get 35 on a page. And so if they didn't, they lost one shot at the front or at the back.
I gotta ask you.
Unless it was something we really, really needed.
I gotta ask you I tell you my favorite Ron McQueeney story. Ron had an opportunity, sometimes celebrities are hanging around that you don't even know about. You never see them. And I want you to tell this story about this one person.
Okay. I know who he's talking about. We were in Long Beach, and my wife at the time was shooting with me, Linda McQueeney. She worked for Indy magazine. She came running up to me and she says, "Let's go to the Marlboro tent to eat. George Hamilton is over there and she wants to meet him." So we go into the Marlboro tent and looking around. I don't see a George Hamilton here. You can tell him by his tan. And so pretty soon I see Emerson. He's going like this. And I point, "Me? Yeah, you." And he brings me over. He's sitting with a couple other guys. So I go over there and I sit down and he introduces me and he says, "This person wants to shoot at the Speedway. Can you help him out?" I said, "Well, I think I can, but you're going to have to play along with me if you don't want to be recognized." I said, "Okay." So we talked for a little while. I said, if you're going to be on my staff, I'll get you set up with a fake name and a credential. And you're not going to really be on my staff. You're going to do whatever you want to, but I'd like to see some of your pictures when you're done. I said, "Okay." So we made the deal. I exchanged phone numbers and went on my merry way. George Harrison. Somebody that was in the Marlboro tent that day, well, I know who it was. Dan Boyd took a picture of me talking to George and Emo and made a little thing and sent to me of Ron McQueeney signing. I'm giving George my phone number, and he says, Ron McQueeney signing the paperwork to join the traveling mulberries instead of the Wilburys. Emerson on drums, George on guitar, and Ron on vocals and keyboards. So that ended up in a book, came out of England called, I think it was called Brits at the Speedway or something like that. I told the story to the guy that came over here to get the pictures and was writing about it, and I told him that story, and he says, "Can I get that picture and put it in my book?" Okay. And he ended up putting the picture in that book. But I got to meet so many celebrities, it's almost, I forget half the time. Some of Donald Davison's office is right next to me, and we decided to sit down and figure out who all the celebrities that we met through the Speedway, or because of the Speedway, or racing. And after about 25, each of us listing about 25 people, and knew there were a lot more, we just lost track of it. One story I tell when I'm giving talks, the last 10 years of my career, I decided to give the start of the race shot, which I always took, off to one of my photographers. And I did it up on that, we had a basket up on the roof of stand E. And so I let one of my photographers take that, and I went down every race and did the start of the race from the flag stand. And of course, each year we had a celebrity flag waver for the start of the race. And I'd give them, the flagman would give them their talk, and I'd say, "I only have one rule. There are actually two rules. A, don't drop the flag. B, don't hit the photographer. I, of course, was a photographer, and the way I took this picture is I would stand, in the flag stand, they had, of course, the thing that kept us in the flag stand, the sidewall, which came about my waist. And there was a box that they put all the flags in, and I put one foot on that box and just held the other out in space in the flag stand. Turn around with my back to the racetrack and the cars coming, and take the picture as the cars were coming underneath the flagman. I'd hold the camera up in the air, pre-focus, shoot with the cars underneath and the flagman waving the flag. And I said, don't hit the photographer. I only had one celebrity flagman hit me. He did it on purpose.
AJ Ford.
Jack Nicholson. And when he got down, he didn't hit me hard, but he hit me hard enough that I knew it. And I had to hang, the first time I had to hang on to the side rail because when he hit me, I was going backwards. And I held on. I looked at him and he was laughing. I thought, do I hit him with a camera or just... That's how he is with photographers. He laughed about it, and we talked about it a little bit, and he's still laughing.
You mentioned the name right to start with, John Fugate. How long did you work with John at the Speedway?
One day. Actually, John and I, there's a lot of things John and I didn't see eye to eye on.
Oh, I know.
But he was attached to the department, the PR department, so I had to deal with him almost on a daily basis when I first got there.
When he graduated out of college, he come up and lived with me, and he went racing with me all the time. And I'd sneak him into all the racetracks. I'd put him in the cockpit and pull the canvas down over him and everything. And so I was really close to him coming up. But as soon as he got that job over there, if he was around me at the Dairy Queen at night or something, why he'd be friendly and nice because I'd buy him an ice cream cone. But if there was some celebrity around, he didn't know who I was.
Exactly. And I got to know that about John, and I just took that.
You know why he left, don't you? You know why he left, how he got fired?
No.
There was a guy that was gonna take over as a Speedway, and you know who he was. He come there and stopped one day and wanted to get some pictures. Have you do a bunch of pictures for him? And he said, sir, he said, we cannot do that. We've got to talk to these people, and we've got to set up an appointment and all that. So he left, and shortly after that, he was appointed as the head of the Speedway. And his first day on the job at 8 o'clock was he come in and he fired John. So I was right in the middle of all that. So.
Charlie Thompson brought that same person. We're talking about John Cooper.
Yeah.
Brought John over to my office. I had no idea who John Cooper was. I should have because of his dealings with USAC, but I was all wrapped up in my little world and trying to at that time I would think I was 3 years on the job or something like that. And I decided that I'll just treat whoever comes over to my office, I'll treat them like I would want to be treated. And that's what I did with John. Charlie Thompson brought John in and introduced him, just said, this is John Cooper. I said, oh. So he'd like to see the operation. I said, sure. So I took him back to the dark room and took him to the rooms where we dried all the prints and took him through the negative storage room and showed him what we did and how we did. Just like anybody that come in and wanted to see the photo department, I gave him the grand tour, and I did that with John. Didn't have any idea who he was or why he was there. And when he left and Charlie left with him, and a few hours later I get a phone call from Charlie. He says, you know who that guy was? I said, no, I don't. He says, that's the new president of the Speedway. But John and I got along. Matter of fact, John was the one that first got me, even as a director, when I first hired, or got that title, I didn't get a pace car. I was not on the pace car list. It was only directors that had been there for a long time. And I think there was 8 of them. And John was the first one that afforded me a pace car. And because I got that pace car shortly after he got there, it caused a big stink with some other people that had been there a lot longer than I had been. And they went to John, and John came to me and said he was having trouble because of it. And I said, John, I have 3 cars at home. I'll be more than, I'd love to have this pace car to drive, but if you need it back, you got it. I turned it in, and Pontiac was the ones that really wanted me to have it, because they'd call me, and this was in 1980, and they called me and they wanted wanted me to shoot the car at several different locations for PR use, and I'd have to borrow somebody's car. So they got me a car, and John came to me, and I think that was before he assigned me a car. The next year he assigned me a car because there was a big stink about it before. So I appreciated John when he was there. Never had a problem with it.
Good guy.
Did you take the picture out of the back of the pace car in 1961 of the starting field?
No, that was before my time.
You know who did take that picture?
No.
Because it was in that, the 100th anniversary, they had a picture of it with the flags flying and.
1961 would have been Bud Jones, and I assumed that he wouldn't have let anybody else do it if he had the chance to do that. I was the same way. If I had a chance to ride in the pace car, whether it was during practice, there was a lot of times that I got to drive the pace car. One funny story it was 86. Are we out of time?
Well, you can talk as long as you want.
It'll get dark. In 86, they had weepers. It was after a rain the day before, and we had weepers on the racetrack, and they were trying to get the track drive for qualifying. So I come off my qualifying platform, and I go down, and I was just used to it. I'd jump in the pace car and drive around the track to take pictures of what was going on. And of course, I couldn't take my own vehicle out there, but I could take their vehicle out there, the actual pace car. So I get down by Foyt's pit, and as I'm driving, he's out there going like this, and he says, I want to ride with you. So I had him hop in, and I drive around and get to the second turn. He says, stop. Okay, so I stop. He gets out of the car, and he's going like this, waving at his grandson, AJ the 4th. Gets in the car, and then we go, and I have to go do my job, and then we go back. But that was a pretty neat deal that day. When I got at the Speedway in 1977 full time, the first 3 weeks I worked there, Clarence was the person that was the head of the grounds, and Clarence Cagle had eyes in the back of his head. He knew everything that was going on at that racetrack. When I'd come in every morning to go to work, I'd go by, and I was driving a yellow 1975 Corvette. I'd go past the guard shack, I'd wave, drive out onto the racetrack. That's when the gate was open all the time. Drive out on the racetrack, make a lap, always staying at 55 or under, but I'd make a lap just because I could. After 3 weeks of that every day, it was no longer a big deal. So I just went out there when I needed to. So a few months later, I get a call from PR wanting me to, actually it was from Tony's office, would you come out and take pictures of the celebrities when we got out there? So I go out to the start-finish line, and Tony is in the corporate station wagon. I'm in my Corvette. I drive out on the racetrack, go the right way around the racetrack, and stop at the start-finish line and get out, and there's Catherine Crosby, Mary Catherine Crosby, and her manager with Tony and a couple other people from PR. They introduced me, and they wanted me to take pictures of everybody, so I did. Pretty soon, Mr. Hallman comes over to me and he says, they want to go around tracking your Corvette. Would you let them? Says, with them driving? He said, yes. Okay. So I gave the keys to the manager, and he took Catherine Crosby around the racetrack. Now, Clarence isn't out there. He's off doing whatever he does in his office. Come back, a couple laps go by, and come back and bring the car back to me and get out. Tony thanks me, and the stars thank me, and manager thanks me. I get in my car and go to take off, and it'll only go about 3 miles an hour. They messed it up some way. Get to my office finally, go up and get a phone call from Clarence Cagle. McQueeney, what were you doing out there on the racetrack going that fast? I said, sir, call Mr. Holman's office. It wasn't me. It was your car. It wasn't me. So he called me back later. He says, I understand. I said, well, you don't understand the whole story. They did something to my car. Mr. Cagle had my car taken up to McIntyre Chevrolet where I bought the car, and they had it fixed, and they gave me Tony's station wagon to drive until I got the car back. Not quite like driving a Corvette, but pretty nice being in Tony's car.
Tony's car.
Yeah.
Do we have any more questions from the audience?
Sure, there's a lot of questions.
Just one real quick. You'd mentioned some of the ones that were difficult to work with. On the flip side, who comes to mind as one of the most accommodating, easiest, kindest, drivers to work with?
I'd have to say, it's hard to pick just one. One I'm still friends with today is Janet Guthrie. I treated her like any other driver when she first came to the Speedway in '76, because I wasn't in that position. I was in that position when she came and made the race. I treated her like any other driver. I treated her with respect, like I treated all the drivers. I never had a minute's trouble with her, and she knows me from when she comes to the old timers banquets. We talk occasionally. I haven't the last couple of years since I retired, just when I see her at the old timers banquets. But I really got along with almost all the drivers. Even after Mario and I had that trouble, I was working the first Denver Grand Prix, and he was there as a part of the same operation, and I got stuck there for an extra day because my flight wasn't going to leave until a day after the thing. He says, come on, you can fly on my plane, and I'll drop you off in Indy, and we'll make an extra stop and drop you off. So I really never had any major problems. I had the first year Montoya came here. He had no idea about the history of the Speedway. He was good. He was one of the best I'd ever seen go around that track for a rookie. And he won the race that year. But he still didn't understand what he had won until a year later.
He certainly did the second time.
Yes, he did. And to this day, yes.
On Janet Guthrie, there's been a lot of talk about her making a movie with Disney, or do you know anything about that they wanted to promote women in
No, I
business?
don't have a clue. I haven't heard that. That'd be great if they had her involved.
There's talk of Hillary Swank playing her.
Yeah, it sounds like it's up and running.
Yeah, that would be a good one.
Well, we want to thank Ron for his generosity in coming here. Danny has an announcement for the Charity of Ron's Choice, which is,
Well, Ron, Race Chasers, all these folks here, a total of $350 to the 500 Old Timers Club.
Thank you very
So
much.
we certainly appreciate this. Great story.
we'd like to thank Ron. I'm sure, knowing Ron, he'll stick around for a couple minutes and tell us more stories.
I got all day.
Thank you.
Right.